In the book of Psalms we read, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars with which you set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you care for him?" You see, there is the human conundrum. Today, for the first time in centuries, humans, especially in Western culture, have an identity problem. We actually don't know what it is to be human. And yet, as the rulers of this world, we have to make decisions about everything, even about humanity, especially about humanity. We are at present locked into massive cultural debates about abortion and euthanasia, about genetic engineering, ecology, cloning, animal liberation, embryonic stem cell research, racism, sexism, speciesism. There are any number of debates, and nearly all of them come back to this question of what is human? And we don't have the answer. I mean, I know that I am one, a human. Some of you may doubt, but I know I am. But okay, I am one, but what am I? Am I a biological machine? And am I an embodied soul? Am I an individual? Am I a sentient being? Am I an animal? See, is whaling murder and abortion a surgical procedure? Or is abortion murder and whaling simply resource harvesting? Genesis 1 commences the Bible's challenging answer to the human conundrum here in verse 26 and says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Now, as I indicated in the last study, the orderly account of God ordering the creation of the world is suddenly interrupted at verse 26, when instead of it saying, "And God said, let there be," God consulted, "Let us make." Now, we don't know whom he is consulting. It may even be just a royal plural. But there is a deliberate break with the pattern of creation and the pattern of the account of creation. As God progressively rises to the climax of his work, we have creation of something unlike everything else he's made, something that is uniquely made, something that is uniquely made in his image, in his likeness. There are 4 observations to make about this clause, "Let us make in our image." Firstly, humans are made. Quite clearly and unambiguously, Genesis 1 says that humans are made, are created, are manufactured. Now, we don't like that word because of the connotation of mass-produced. But leave the negative connotation out of it, we have been made. He made us as objects, like animals. We are part of creation. We're not separate from it. We are dependent upon God for our existence, just like the rest of creation. We do not rival God as eternal beings. We are creatures of his making. Now, being made has twin implications, one that we like and one that we don't like. On the one hand, we find being made offensive because it means that we are made for his purposes, responsible to him, owned by him. On the other hand, we find being made satisfying because it means that we are meaningful and life is purposeful. We're not meaningless accidents in a random world, but the purposeful, intentional creation of a personal God. The trouble is you can't have one hand without the other. You can't have the satisfaction of being meaningful without the offence of being made. You see, we desire to have meaning and purpose for ourselves, but we desire to have it without being owned by anybody else and without being made by anybody else. Those who think that the world is just an accident a random, meaningless Big Bang over time, they have this terrible problem as to what is the meaning of it all. Jacques Monod, who is a great biochemist, a Frenchman of the late 20th century, an atheist, wrote a book called Chance and Necessity. There was a chance happening, the Big Bang, which had built into it a necessity that over time extrapolated itself out into us, as to what we are, what we have. For those who think like that the world is just an accident, when asked what is the meaning of life, the answer is nothing. Or, that's actually a meaningless question. Or, why should life have a meaning? It just is. Accidents don't have meanings. We're here because we're here because we're here because we're here. And so if you say to me, what is the meaning of life? I'll say, pass the salt. Or 42. It doesn't have a meaning, you see. For the very idea of meaningful existence comes from being personally created and owned by God. Remove God, remove the Creator, remove creation, and all meaningful language is now stupid. All purposive language is now stupid. If God were not personal, if God didn't create by his word intentionally, then the world and life would have no meaning. So something huge is being said about us and about life and about what we are and who we are and how to live when we read the word, let us make man in our image. Second observation takes us even further. For humanity is not only made by God, but made in God's image and likeness. The two words image and likeness are used synonymously and interchangeably in the Bible without any observable distinction. But the phrase tells us more of the meaning and purpose of humanity's creation. The opponents of Christianity, like Lynn White, who was one of the great fathers of modern ecology, wrote in the 1970s, or Peter Singer, who's today the ethicist and philosopher at Princeton University, they know that this phrase, the image of God, is the key Judaic-Christian distinctive in our understanding of life and humanity and how to live. And whereas they do not like the word God, they really dislike the phrase, the image of God. For that sets humans apart from everything else and gives humans place, role, identity, quite different to the rest of creation. And so it is their key hate. This phrase tells us that not only we are made by God and for God's purpose, but we're also made uniquely in all of his creation, and that our uniqueness lies in our relationship with him. That our purpose lies in our relationship to him. That there is a connection between our Creator and us that makes us like him and that makes our relationship with him possible. It means God could become man and still be God. It means communication with God is possible. Religious language is possible. We can talk about God because there is a relationship between us and God. It means we can talk meaningfully about him, for we are like him. It actually means we can talk because we are like him. For in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The third observation is captured in the word dominion. But I need to give three caveats, three kind of qualifications to this, and pursue the question, in what way are we like God? What does it mean to be in the image of God? And the answer is found in verse 26 and verse 28 in the concept of dominion. And let them have dominion over, verse 26, and verse 28, and have dominion over. God is the ruler of the universe. And humans are created to be like him, the rulers in his world, in dominion over the creatures of the world. That is, God didn't create us for two things. One, to be like him, and two, to have dominion. No. We are like him in that we have dominion. That's what it is that makes us like him. It's one and the same thing. For to be like him is to have dominion, is to be the ruler of the world. We stand in relation to the world as God does, though being different because we are created and he is not. He made the world for his own purpose, and his purpose included making one part of it like him to be the ruler of his world. And so he has made the world for us. It is the world we are appointed to rule and govern, to fill and to subdue and to make our own. The world was created for the human. Jumping ahead, of course, you will remember that in Colossians 1 you're told that it was all made for Jesus, the image of the invisible God. But let me add the three caveats here. Firstly, beware of jumping from the words ruler and dominion to the kind of humans that we know who have exercised such rule, such as Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler or Pol Pot, to the human rulers who abuse their power and destroy life. They all failed to rule like God, caring for, being responsible for serving his creation. They were rulers, but they were not rulers like God. They were perversions of humanity. Secondly, beware of jumping from the concept of ruler to the conclusion that we rule independently and without reference to God. We are the vicegerents. It's a lovely word. I can hardly ever use it in any other context and situation. And so, having learnt it, I like to share it with people. Not the vice-regents, the vicegerents. Vice-regents rule with, vicegerents rule under. And we are the vicegerents of creation. Thirdly, beware of finding the image of God in our abilities and our capabilities. We have our abilities and capabilities because we have been made in the image of God. They are not what make us in the image of God. The image of God is found in our appointment, not in our skills, not in our talents, not in our abilities. We're not in the image of God because we're clever. We're not in the image of God because we speak. We're not in the image of God because we've got a thumb that works against the fingers. We may have these things because we're in the image of God, but they don't make us in the image of God. We're in the image of God because of God's appointment of us over his world. That's why we're in the image of God. I'm not a human because I can speak and reason, as if training a monkey to speak and reason would suddenly make it a human. I'm not to be discarded as less than human because I'm less intelligent than you are. I am human and have my dignity and place because I share with you and all humanity the rule of the world by divine appointment, not by human ingenuity or ability. So all humans are made in the image of God and are equal in their humanity. This is an extraordinary concept, friends, isn't it? Because you can just pause for a minute, you can start to see the enormous social ethics that are going to flow out of such a view. So it leads to the fourth observation to make, namely, that both male and female are included in the likeness of God. Verse 27 makes clear, God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Male and female together comprise humanity. The humanity that is in the image of God. It's not two humanities, male and female. It's not two statuses, male and female. It's not two appointments, male and female, but one humanity, male and female together. One humanity in the image of God. And all humans are in that one image of God together. Male and female. Humanity is to fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over it. The oneness, the unity of humanity in creation is very important to grasp, and this most Westerners find difficult to grasp because we are so full of individualistic thinking that we think I alone am made in the image of God, and that God is making lots of his little images everywhere, when in fact it is humanity that is in the image of God, and we all participate in humanity, and that is why we are in the image of God. It lies at the very heart of the basis of our justice system that all are created equal. We're not, are we? Some of us are in rich families, some in poor families, some in free nations, some are stateless, some are under tyranny, some are born into slavery. We're not equal at any point in one sense that we're born, and yet we are born and created equal, equally human, equally part of the image of God, sharing together in the image of God. Now, this statement of Genesis 1 then has enormous implications. Let me gather them up under three groupings of implications. Implications for atheists, for the religious, and then for the Christians. Firstly, for the atheists. In chapter 9 of Genesis, we're reminded that being in God's image gives to all of us value over and above all the other creatures. So if you just go across to chapter 9, and you'll see in verse 6, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. Notice where our value is to be found. It's not in our ability, but in our appointment in creation as the image of God. This is the basis for valuing humans differently to animals. This is why whaling is not murder. Possibly unwise, possibly wrong. In fact, I'm quite opposed to it, but it's not murder. That's a confusion of categories. It's why Suti, the burning of widows at the husband's funeral, is clearly wrong and is murder. For all humans, husbands and wives, are created in the image of God. Whereas if all life was just an accident, all life was no more than chance and necessity over a long period of time, then killing would be a justifiable expediency for powerful people in particular, for Nietzsche's supermen. You see it in the novels like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, but what's worse is you see it in reality in the life of Adolf Hitler, who was much taken with the idea, and the practices of Mao and Stalin and a whole range of other monsters of the 20th century. They grasped hold of the reality man is not made in the image of God. We're just an accident of the Big Bang. Well, accidents can be removed without any consequences, whereas those who are made in the image of God cannot be removed without the consequence of facing God for what you have done. Here we see the reason behind the culture war in Western civilization. The abortion, the cloning, the euthanasia, the infanticide. These are being encouraged by those who do not see humanity's value in the image of God, by appointment of God. I read the Sunday Times in January 2004 when I was in England, and it said a government advisor on genetics, the professor of bioethics at Manchester University is the professor of bioethics, a government advisor, has provoked uproar by suggesting that it may be acceptable to destroy babies with defects soon after birth. He declined to say what defects might justify terminating the baby's life or the maximum age for such a course of action. He is said to have argued that there is no moral difference between terminating a fetus found by tests to have defects and one where the parents only discovered the abnormalities after birth. He also recently expressed support for sex selection for social reasons among babies. If it isn't wrong to wish for a bonny, bouncing baby girl, why would it be wrong to make use of technology to play fairy godmother, he said. And if you can play fairy godmother before birth, why not after birth? There really is no difference. You don't think people think this way? This is a government advisor to the British government who is a professor of all things ethics. And he thinks this way. And it's not just at the beginning of life. It's at the end of life also. There the weak and vulnerable will be dispensed with by being persuaded that they're a burden, and it would really help the family if they would just shuffle off the stage of life while leaving, of course, their money behind for the family to inherit. Sorry for taking a little longer on this section, but people keep putting religious beliefs like atheism, for it is a religion, into the harmless category, for they all teach the same, don't they? And frankly, friends, this once mighty Christian culture of ours is selling its heritage and its birthright for a bunch of lies. If we are not created in the image of God, as an atheist who believes there is no God would claim, if we're just the outcome of a cosmic accident, a chance happening with an inbuilt materialistic necessity, then we have no distinctive place to play in the world and we are of no distinctive value. This is the argument of the Australian Professor Peter Singer at Princeton University. The right to life does not exist in our humanity, he says, but in our abilities, especially our sentient, our thinking abilities. So animals have the same right of life as humans do. And incapacitated humans, especially humans with a disease like Alzheimer's disease, who have lost their sentient ability, animals have much more right to life than they do. In fact, animals take up less resources and create less global warming, and so fewer humans, more animals would be a better way of organising the universe. Indeed, one wonders whether it wouldn't be better to do away with humans altogether. You have to beware of clever men who say that cleverness is the essence of humanity. And cleverness is the basis of human rights. Beware of clever men who say that. Isn't it fascinating how God is made in their own image rather than they being made in God's? Secondly, the implications for the religious. For the Bible is harsh in its condemnation of the foolishness of idolatry. I haven't got time for it, but look up Psalm 115 later, or Isaiah 44. Psalm 115 or Isaiah 44. We are created in the image of God, and statues, images, icons fail to represent God. Any idol or handmade image of God is always a false image, for it is lifeless, it is speechless, it is dead, it is dumb. It is not only less than God, it's also less than the worshippers who made it and use it. Everything that you know about God is different to a statue. You cannot represent God by statues. God is always opposed to idolatry, to artistic misrepresentations of himself, for he has made his image in us. We are the images of God. We are alive and rule the world. There is nothing in the universe like God except us. Remember when Jesus was asked about the coin? And he said, as he took the coin, whose image and subscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. And Jesus answering said unto them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. We are the image of God. To turn anything else as an image of God is blasphemous in its misrepresentation of God and insulting in the dignity of humanity that is made in the image of God. But notice also what God requires of his image. It's not our money, it's not our time, but our very self. Give to God the things that have God's image stamped upon them. Us. Give to God his image. We are his and to be given fully to him. Which brings us to the third of the implications to the Christians. For the psalmist pondered, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon, the stars which you set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you care for him? And the New Testament answers his questioning in Hebrews chapter 2. For the world was not made for angels to rule, but for humanity. And yet humans do not seem to be able to rule the world. See it in verse 8? At present we don't see everything in subjection to humans. But here is the great news of the gospel. What we do see in verse 9 is Jesus. Jesus, who was like humans, made little lower than the angels for a time, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. But we see Jesus now crowned with glory and honour. And not Jesus alone, for in his death he was tasting death for everyone, so as to bring us to the glory for which we have been created in verses 10 and 11. That is, Jesus is the perfect image of the invisible God. He is the one, the man for whom the whole world was created. He is the one for whom you and I have been created. He, Jesus, is the ruler of the world, both this world and the world to come. Why can we worship Jesus? Because he is the one for whom, by whom, through whom we have been created. But Jesus was the true human. And his true humanity was seen at the cross, where he laid down his life for the sins of the world. For at that moment he was in dominion like no other human has ever been. And so we come to full humanity, for which we were created, ruling the world under God, when we stop rebelling against God and find the mercy and forgiveness that only Jesus could win for us.